Schönen guten Abend. Herzlich willkommen zu unserem ersten Friday Night Talk im Jahre 2022 und das auf einer neuen Plattform. Wir sind heute zum ersten Mal auf YouTube live. Yay! Und wir, das sind Franziska Engel und Axel Becker und wir sind sowohl die Moderatoren des nächsten Kongresses als auch heute die Interviewer für unsere beiden Multilinguisten, die wir eingeladen haben, nämlich Lynn Bell und Martin Sebastian Moritz. Und wo die beiden herkommen und sowas, das erzählen sie uns gleich selber, allerdings auf Englisch. Also der Talk heute wird tatsächlich ein Talk, nämlich in Englisch sein. Franziska, habe ich noch irgendwas vergessen?
Wir könnten sagen, dass wir das tun für den Deutschen Astrologen-Verband und um ein wenig Werbung zu machen für den Kongress des Deutschen Astrologen-Verbandes. Und ja, ich stelle dich doch gerne mal vor, Axel Becker, mein lieber Kollege aus Bonn, der mit mir seit letztem Jahr hier den Friday Night Talk moderiert und auch den Kongress.
Genau. Der letzte Kongress war online, deswegen sozusagen, da sind für die kleinen Bildchen immer klare Bilder nötig. Genau. Und dann stelle ich dich mal vor, Franziska Engel, die ist im Vorstand des Deutschen Astrologen-Verbandes für die Social Media zuständig. Und genau, natürlich Astrologin und Sinologin, also auch eine Multilinguistin hier.
Okay, danke dir. Dann würde ich sagen, also wir switchen dann jetzt mal rüber auf Englisch und ich freue mich sehr, dass wir heute Lynn Bell und Martin Sebastian Moritz als erste Gäste in diesem Jahr vorstellen dürfen. So let's turn to English and I welcome you very warmly, Lynn Bell and Martin Sebastian Moritz. Very happy to have you here tonight with us.
Likewise. Hello.
So, and I will check the chat in the background, hoping that there will be a lot of people watching us and maybe having questions. And Axel has prepared a number of questions and we'll start asking.
Yeah, so my first question is, what about the multilinguicity that you are providing, both of you? So let's start maybe with Lynn. So what are all the languages that you speak and where do you live and where do you come from?
Well, I was born in Chicago and I live in Paris. And right now I'm in Burgundy in France. And I really only speak French and English well. And, you know, I understood what you said in German. Guten Abend, herzlich willkommen. I understood a little bit, but I couldn't really make a sentence or be very competent. So I actually taught in, when I came to France, I came with the idea that it was really important to learn another language completely. And it was an idea from an anthropologist named Wharton, I think, who said that you could only learn another form of consciousness if you learned another language. And so when I came, I wanted to stay for 2 years in France, minimum, so that I could completely leave my old way of thinking about the world. And for anybody who's moved to another country, it's so exhausting to only be in another language. It's like going underwater all the time. But I think it's amazing because just like astrology helps you enter into contact with multi-consciousness, another language helps you do that.
And Martin, so what was your point of going underwater into another language?
Well, that's a very good question. I think I considered myself always an Anglophile. So I lived in London for a great many years. And at one point, when I started out professionally as an astrologer, I switched to English. So I'm teaching, I'm writing, and of course, attending many conferences, albeit only, you know, virtually these days. It's you meet many colleagues, and it's so rich to share your passion on astrology. And of course, that's in English because the market is much wider, to be sure. And I find myself doing astrology in English in a different way. somehow I don't take it too seriously, because in German, it's more serious because I want to get everything just right. And in English, that's not possible because it's not my mother language, So I'm good at English, I know that, but it only goes to a certain degree. And it gets better and better, and you challenge yourself. And of course, having to deal with different accents, like British or Irish or American or German even. So it always sounds differently, and you have to be like mega alert not to get anything wrong. And of course, you do get stuff wrong all the time. So you have to allow yourself, and I have Virgo rising, so I'm having a hard time allowing myself that. But that's the ticket,
So we are very lucky to have exactly you with Virgo rising as the translator for Lynn Bell's lecture at this year's conference. So that's really, really a nice thing. And I wanted to ask both of you about a very unhappy topic, but it is, right now there. So I think, what is your take, your astrologist take about the war of Russia against Ukraine? So just that we, have a little thought pattern about that.
Well, one of the things that I was following this year was the retrograde of Venus, and Mars catching up to Venus when she was slow of motion, and having two conjunctions between Mars and Venus. And I was talking about this with colleagues, and we did some research and saw that this double conjunction of Mars and Venus happens every 12 or 13 years. But what was extremely unusual is that the Venus retrograde was conjunct Pluto, the Mercury retrograde was conjunct Pluto, then, and on the 2nd or 3rd of March, Venus, Mars, and Pluto are all going to be in a triple conjunction on the same degree. But the day that Putin invaded, Mars was at 22 Capricorn, which is the degree of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that happened in January 2020, which launched the entire pandemic. And we know that when the minor planets come in and activate a large planet cycle, that cycle in a way is called up, it's activated, it's a sensitive point. So the coincidence was sort of surprising. And if you work with planetary nodes, that's a bit technical. It's also the planetary node of Saturn.
I'd like to pose a question. Is mundane astrology, which you are talking about now, the astrology which concerns all of us, regardless of a personal horoscope, is that a major topic in your work as an astrologer?
Oh, it's a major interest for me. I'm very interested in the larger archetypal patterns. And I was in the States giving lectures on Saturn, Pluto. And I went to Australia in January 2020. And I gave a workshop on Saturn, Pluto. And the organizer said, but it's going to be over. I said, no. But you have to remember that André Barbeau, the greatest mundane astrologer of the 20th century, is French. And I knew André and discovered his work when I moved to France. So, and for me, it was a revelation. And there's a relationship between the collective psyche and the individual psyche.
Okay, thank you.
Mm.
How about you, Martin? Do you work with mundane astrology as well? Do you have any, and do you want to say anything about the current situation regarding the war between Russia and Ukraine?
Yes, by all means, because there has been such high expectation in the astrology community about Jupiter entering Pisces and, forming a conjunction, and it was all about, oh, it's going to be wonderful and it's going to be like, the best thing that can happen. And I was always like, actually, it's a two-sided, blade, because what is the truth and what we are experiencing now after the pandemic, which is collective issue, the war which is happening now, will also be affecting all of us on a collective level. So you can't just say, oh, you know, it's in the Ukraine, it's in Russia, you know, I can't be bothered, because it might have larger implications. And that's pretty much what Jupiter, which, you know, blows up everything. And in Pisces, because, you know, one fish is swimming in this and one fish is swimming into the other direction. And at the moment, it's like, oh, it can get graver and graver and graver, or is there still hope? But how does that come about? And that's pretty much about this mysterious Pisces sign. So none of us knows how to grasp it. It's a mystery, isn't it? And of course, we all feel helpless because it's happening on a collective level. So I don't know.
I mean, don't you think that we're still in this? Everything we've lived through in the pandemic has made all of us a little bit crazy at certain moments.
Yes.
And the pressure, well, you know, and people have held up very well, but there's that edginess and that tendency to split or to go in your old problems. And I think that's what we're seeing. You know, I'm American. America is pretty, basically a lot of people think America's having a psychotic break at the moment. So now we have one in Russia too.
And also, it's all about fatigue, isn't it? We are also fatigued about compassion, because there are limits to how compassionate you can get, and always worry about, oh, the world is suffering, and now this pops up. And of course, all our compassion resources are brought to the fore again. And we have to look inside ourselves. Okay, how much passion have I got left? And I mean, over the next days in Berlin, for example, there is, you know, many thousands of people will get to the street in order to show their, you know, compassion for Ukraine. So.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. You seem to be, you know, the guy for the heavy-duty topics, because at the last astrologers convention where you talked, it was about the 8th house, and this year it will be about Lilith. And you are a psychologist. So my question would be, when you approach themes that give shivers to other people, is there like a golden sentence that the psychologist always bears in his mind to you know, like to go into the dark deep forest and encounter the wolf?
Well, I mean, you can be a psychologist and dig deep in private, but my bread and butter is I'm a psychotherapist, and I work with couples most of the time. And of course, and I did 10 years of psychodrama. So I was teaching psychodrama. And if you've done that, and I was an actor before, so I'm very much into bringing things out, not because I'm such a vile person who just likes, oh, it's going to be vile. But, you know, it's all about, well, in order to find yourself, of course, you have to look out for your shadow and see, actually, that's really interesting. And the older I get and the more I work, the more I become interested in these, as you call it, deep issues. Because, I mean, well, on the other hand, I do like small talk, and I can be, you know, cheerful and jolly and what have you. But I always want to counterbalance that with, you know, working with people and finding out what's, you know, what really rocks their boat. So that's, well, I can't help it. It's just, it happens naturally. So the digger I deep, the more down under I get, if you will. So.
Okay.
May I ask, which brings me immediately to the question, is this how you came to be interested in astrology as well? Maybe you can take us a little bit on your journey. How did you find astrology?
My mum always said that I was born at 12:30, and as I'm born on the 20th of April, which is in 3 out of 4 cases Aries, I spent, you know, my teenage years with, okay, I'm an Aries with Leo rising. Little did I know, I was born an hour and a half later, and I'm not an Aries at all. I'm a Taurus. So I'm a Taurus with Virgo rising. So I realized that, hold on, I'm the same person, am I not? So I just bought myself like a beginner's book. And she said, oh, interesting. And there's all this other stuff going on with Moon and Venus and what have you. And then I booked my first course. And little did I know that it was too niche, because it was Münchner Rhythmenlehre, Wolfgang Döber einer, which is like the niche of the niche of the niche of the niche.
Yeah.
And after that, it took years to come out of that and become more broad again. And over the years, I mean, I did, one course after the other and read one book after the other. But having said that, it took about like 20 years before I mustered up the courage to actually become an astrologer in my own right, meaning like consulting, teaching, writing, and so on and so forth. And that's because I hold astrology in such high esteem, because I think you can do wonders with it, but I also think you can, sometimes, I mean, the stories clients get back to me on, it's like, oh, there was this astrologer who said I can never get pregnant, or I should never open a shop. I say, oh my goodness, how can you ever say that? So, and it's an ongoing process. I'm always learning. It's so fascinating, really.
So wonderful then that you are one of the of the speakers at the Congress this year, and you're going to talk about an interesting topic. Axel mentioned it already. And not only are you going to talk, but you're also going to translate Lynn Bell's talk. So we already discussed a little bit ahead of this public live stream here now. We would like to know a little bit about how did you two get to know each other? How is there this close connection that you do the translation for Lynn? Maybe Lynn, you would like to introduce, why is Martin your translator at this Congress?
Well, Martin reached out to me, and it was fantastic. Martin reached out to me and said, I love your work, or I don't know what his words were exactly, but we began to have a chat over a Facebook message, I think. Martin, isn't that right? And he told me that he'd worked on a lot on the 8th house, and he'd been inspired by a talk he heard me give on vampires about the 8th house. So vampire for me was a metaphor of the way into the 8th. And I also presented work of thinking about the houses. And it's very rare. Many of us, we listen to other astrologers and we take up ideas. And I have a good friend who says, I've stolen from so many astrologers, but I just don't remember who. And it's very rare that someone like Martin will contact you and say, I was really inspired by your work. And it helped my thinking, and we go forward. And that was a wonder. It was really a gift for me to be contacted by Martin.
Oh, I was just so hooked, because I was at the conference where Christian König translated for Bernadette Brady. And I thought those two made a brilliant couple. And I was so inspired, because you could really sense that both were very passionate about the work they presented. And I said, actually, I quite like that. And my story with Lynn goes a long way, because she was the one, I mean, she didn't know that, who got me into, I want to teach as well, because I attended a workshop more on Neptune in London. And that was such a weird workshop, because in the audience, it turned out there was like a whole row of mediums, psychics sitting. And Lynn said like, okay, so you guys, what do you have by means of Neptune issues? And is any one of you a medium? And, and the first one go, me. It was so weird. It was so weird. But on the other hand, I said, well, this is so inspiring, and I had such fun. And I realized you can give something which is insightful and plus entertaining, and you feel that someone is having a great time. So I really sat in the audience, and thought, that's what I like to do as well. So, I mean, I owe a lot to Lynn, obviously, absolutely. So, yeah.
Wonderful. So I'm looking forward to that, and maybe some German publisher might take this event to as a reason to have one or two or more of books translated in German again, because I read the book about family threads. Yeah, I was thrilled. So there should definitely be a German version of that on the market.
Oh, well, great. I'm glad to hear that. I think that material is something that I love so much, working in family patterns. And it's fundamental for astrology work, I think, because we're always, I think in the beginning with astrology, we want to know about what about me, what will happen, what's this and that. But after a while, you realize there's more to you than you, and that you're always finding more. And I call that book in English planetary threads, like the thread you use for sewing, that you pull out to see the connections among generations. And I love that work.
Yeah. And is there some story about you coming to astrology? As
well, I started very young. I was a compulsive reader as a child. And one of the things I read were the horoscopes in the newspaper. And when I was about 12, I think, I started to get really interested in signs, like, my father's a Leo and my mother's a Cancer, and I'm a Gemini and my sister's an Aquarian. And by the time I was 13, I knew the birth dates of everyone in my class.
Wow.
And I started, I started to spend my money on little horoscope rolls with monthly predictions. But I lived in a place with no astrology. So it took me a really long time to gather material and to learn. And it was only when I was, sorry, I have to cough. Yeah. I don't know what happened. That's why I had water.
No problem.
Yeah, have a water. Don't. No rush.
Better?
Yeah, better. And one of the, no, not better. You talk. I'll tell later. Obviously, they don't want me to tell you.
Okay. well, then I will ask Martin a question that I could ask you afterwards, because Martin also has on his blog, for example, Baerbock and Scholz and Biden as topics. So I wanted to ask whether you two have any criteria before you openly tell somebody's chart. So is there some rule inside of yourself? Now I can put it in the open, in the public's eye or not?
Well, that's a good question. I think I go by the rule if it's in the public domain, like if the chart, for example, is at Astrodienst, or I went by the time which was heralded at the astrologers at the DAV, wasn't it? Because someone picked up someone who says Olaf Scholz was presumably blah, 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 blah. And I said, okay.
Polish astrologer.
Yeah. And of course, in my article, I always said, okay, presumably, given that, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's a person who is in the public eye. And when I use case studies for my articles and in my book, of course, I get to the people and say, well, you can choose a name. So if you don't want to go by your real name, pick one, and I won't quote your data. So just put in the chart and then make it anonymous, or just call it, Peter or Mary or whoever. And I think that's what makes the difference to me. If it's a private person who was, and I don't want to divulge anything and, secure anonymity. But if it's like, Olaf Scholz or Joe Biden, I mean, what do they want to do? Sue me? I mean,
Who knows?
Okay, is that the same thoughts that you would have, Lynn? Or
yeah, I think I was probably more kamikaze about this when I was younger. And when I wrote, recently I've noticed, and particularly my colleagues in the Black community in the United States have said, when someone dies, say, let's not talk about this chart. That's morbid. Leave the person their peace. You can say something about the person, but why immediately analyze the chart? Like, why did they die? And I've come to think that there is a kind of respect with public figures, and at the same time, public figures are like the gods and goddesses of our times. They're probably many of us have taught the charts of Prince Harry and Meghan in the UK. Who have fascinating synastry, and I don't feel like, I'm not going to trash them. I'm going to talk about whoever I talk about with respect, because we as astrologers also project onto charts, and so I think that's one of the things you have to take into account if you use someone, even Putin, or other people I won't mention, to have a kind of respect for a fellow human.
Okay. Well, one thing that is interesting for me is the word diamond, because you will talk in our convention about the diamond, and I'm asking about the translation of that, because if you directly translate it to German, the word Dämon seems to be darker than the English word. So I wanted to ask you too about the translation, topic translation, and the word diamond.
Well, this word is Greek. And actually, I think the first time I ran into it was in William Lilly. So William Lilly was, I have a facsimile copy of Christian Astrology, his big book. And I'm reading the 11th and 12th house saying, this is the house of the good diamond, and this is the house of the bad diamond. I'm like, what's that? And this is where this work comes from, really. So it's a term, it has to do with the invisible part of astrology, like what connects us to purpose and what connects us to soul. So of course in English, the original Greek word diamond probably is the same root as demon, which is a very dark and negative word. And so it has to be redefined whenever it's used. But it was reused by some very important psychotherapists in the 20th century. So we'll be talking about that too.
It's so wonderful that we have a psychotherapist to translate you. Martin, do you have any thoughts about that too?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it might, amongst others, boil down to you. I mean, we are all sort of haunted by certain premonitions, or we feel like bound to do something or shy away from something, and which is, for example, what you do in psychodrama. So you get in contact with your inner voices, if you will, or interjections as they are called. And what Lynn describes is, as a matter of fact, I mean, the 11th house, which is rather abstract, wouldn't you agree? But also in ancient astrology is the house of wishes. And in modern astrology is the house of friends, and so on and so forth. And that's, of course, more friendly than getting lost in the 12th house. And the 12th house, as well as the 8th house, is a bit scary because it's so difficult to grasp, and you can get lost. You can get absolutely lost. So you have to watch out. And I'm not going to tell more about that because that's Lynn's topics and we want to read the rights and everything. But, you know, there is loads and loads and loads behind it. It's really interesting and it's really complex. It's really complex.
Okay, so more on the topic of to get lost. You have been at conventions in English-speaking language countries and to German conventions. So,
Yes.
and I know that Lynn's first time in Germany will be in fall. So, is there anything that you can prepare Lynn with? So, some differences for, yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, in Germany, everyone wants to talk English because we think it's polite, and we all had English at school. Whereas, I mean, in France, you wouldn't be such obliging. I mean, if you talk to people in Paris in English, they would go like, "Comment? Je ne comprends pas." Blah, 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 blah. And that's different in German. I think we all appreciate native speakers from America, from the UK, and so on and so forth. So it's all a big, big welcome. I'm absolutely sure about that. Wouldn't you agree? You two
Absolutely.
hosts.
We are all excited and very happy to have you with us in September in Bad Kissingen.
Yeah.
Think of Bernadette. I mean, really, I mean, think of Bernadette and how warmly she was welcomed, right?
Yes, Darby Costello as well.
Darby.
Darby came too.
Yes.
Yeah, we always try to have also international renowned speakers, and that's wonderful that you're going to be there. So I hope that our audience today will be inspired and all curious, wanting to listen to the 2 talks you're giving, and then also the combination with your translation, Martin Sebastian.
Martin's talking about Lilith.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Gender and gender issues. Because
okay, do you want to make the audience a little bit curious about your talk, please?
Yes, because Lilith, and there has been loads and loads of research on Lilith, and I always boil it down to it's a sort of forbidden part of femininity, and not only in a woman's chart, but also in a man's chart. And since we are living in the age of gender fluency, is that the correct one? Fluency? So it's a non-binary, let's call it that. Yeah, exactly. And it's all about coming to terms with these hidden parts of our non-binary, maybe, but of course, hidden and forbidden and taboo part of femininity. And that I combined with, looking at the charts of men, looking at the chart of, drag queens and of transition people. And I always find that with Mars and Venus, and if you combine that with Black Moon Lilith, you will find significant placements. That's really fascinating. And I'd like to, elaborate on that because it's so fascinating.
And as far as I know, there are different signatures connected with the name of Lilith, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure you're going to introduce that to the audience as well. First of all, to learn about which Lilith to use.
Yeah.
But we're not going to go into detail. Let's everybody.
No, it's boring, but let's not do that.
I see. Okay, but don't you isn't that, well, that's important because they're in certainly very different locations.
No, of course. But I mean, I do know my way around astronomy, but it's not my favorite topic. That's what I meant,
I see.
But of course, I can explain the different Liliths and which one I pick and work with.
Okay.
I can provide you with that.
Very good. Well, I think that's a nice way to come to a conclusion, because what made me curious right now, and maybe we can use that as a final question. You say that's boring. What is it that you enjoy? What makes fun? What do you think is a joyful thing to do? Doesn't need to have to do with astrology. Maybe it is astrology. What do you like? I saw you have cats. Maybe it's playing with your cats.
Cats. Yeah.
My cats.
So I have cats.
Oh.
So it's 2 of them. It's brothers, and the other one is taking a nap somewhere. But they're very naughty. So they're, tearing the place apart in the morning, in the evening, and So what drives me? I like to work with people as a psychotherapist, as an astrologer, but also as a private human being. So yeah, that's that, I presume.
Thank you. And Lynn, do you want to share something with us?
Well, I think astrology is a great passion. I love what happens. One of the reasons I became an astrologer is because when I started doing readings, something happened that didn't happen anywhere else in my life. Like there was a kind of a special quality to exchange, to attention, to conversation, to what happened. It felt as though I were stepping into a realm I didn't know in any other place in my life. Like I love to cook. That's one reason I'm in France. I don't cook as much as I used to, but and I'm in the country right now, so I'm sort of working in the garden when I have a little bit of time this week. I just got back out here. And, but I'm like Martin, I love people. I care deeply about people. I want to know about them and what their lives are about. And I think that's what motivates me most.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I'm so excited to then meet you all in person, finally, after 2 years not having had a present astrologers conference in Germany. I'm all excited that hopefully that's what we are planning for. We'll all meet in Bad Kissingen, and I hope there will be many more people coming and meeting, and I'm looking forward to meet you in person as well, Lynn, Martin.
Great.
Great that you were here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here, Axel, as well. It's great you are back. Yeah, I'm very happy. So thank you and see you very soon. Have a great time. Stay safe.
Okay.
Bye-bye.